you so much for being here, and for all of everything that we all share, right? This journey and all of the different ways that we're involved in birth keeping is pretty amazing, and all of the roots that we have and all of the ways we bring it to the space that we share today is really, really beautiful. So I'd like to just take a moment and just be grateful with each other, and to thank Creator for bringing us all together, and this incredible of Indigenous people and the wisdom and the medicine that we share together. This has been, I'm going to share my recording here in a moment, and so I'll go more into my story then. But basically, you know, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a lactation support peer counselor and health educator, and I have had a really long journey of discovering my own indigeneity, as well as how that interacts with birth and lactation, particularly in the United States. I can't speak to what that looks like, you know, in other places of the world or even other parts of Turtle Island. But here, you know, this is just my experience as one person. And yeah, so I just like to take a moment and say thank you to everyone, and thank you, Creator, for bringing us together, and this beautiful land that we all share, and all of our beautiful stories. I know that we all, you know, have these great stories in our heritage and in our traditions, and it's a gift that we all get to share them. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I recorded a portion of my presentation, and then we'll move into questions and answers. If you want more specifics about anything that I share, please feel free to ask. Also, anything in the chat box, if something comes up and you want to comment on it, feel free to use the chat box. And so, yeah, with that, there we go. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Montez. She Miigwech for being here with me today. I'm just going to jump right into sharing a little bit of my story. So first of all, I come from people, the Anishinaabe people, Little Traverse Bay Band Odawa, and immigrants from Mexico and some settlers. And integrating that into my identity has been a lifelong journey. And the more, so most recently in the last probably 10 years, 5 to 10 years, has been this incredible period of restoration for me, and it has been so intricately tied to birthing and feeding my babies, and it just has been this really incredible gift that I've been given by my community and the ancestors and Creator and this beautiful world. And I'm just so grateful. So, and I think it's really important that we recognize as we are going forward, raising babies and catching babies and helping babies feed, that all of these things are so connected and so vital to maintain the restoration and the live. So just a brief history. So my grandmother was born on the reservation in Michigan, and when she was 5 years old, she was coming home from school, and she was met with police officers and priests who told her that her whole family, all of her 9 brothers and sisters and her parents, were all dead, and that she was very lucky because the nuns were going to be taking care of her. And, you know, because they had no money or anything, the payment for that was that she then would become a nun in gratitude to them for saving her. Now, what we learned when she was about 50 years old and all of her sisters were dead and her parents were dead, but her brothers were not, was that had been a lie the entire time. And it was just part of what was being done here to remove Indigenous people. You know, if they couldn't kill them anymore, stop stop us from existing, right? So I'm just so grateful that my grandmother wasn't sterilized like many people were. And I think it's a beautiful testament to resilience that she then went on to have 6 kids with another beautiful brown human from Mexico. And I don't know much about my grandfather's heritage because both of them, unfortunately, had been removed from heritage and culture from, due to a lot of racism and internalized shame about all of these things, about the things they've been taught about the people that we're from. And so I didn't think much about these things. I always, I wanted more. I've always felt like we were missing something, and I didn't know how to get it back. But I also lived in, colonized America in Southern California and was like, I guess this is just life. And there was always weird things, that come up, just being a brown human in a lot of white spaces and having different experiences and even learning different stories about, from the colonizer mindset about, the Indians, and how they were conquered and all of these things, and trying to figure out, like, where do I fit into that? And where does my grandmother fit into that? And my dad and all of us. And then, you just live your life and don't necessarily, it takes something big, often. For me, it did, at least. I had my babies, so I wasn't expecting to be able to have children. I had, whatever, like folks do. I had various different, like endometriosis and whatever. So no big deal. Didn't really think about it much. And then I was, I was really involved in food justice. I was a professional seed-to-table chef. I loved it. When I discovered cooking, I felt like I could feel in my hands something. And I know now, I feel like that is the ancestors, and that is the people, and that is the blood. And so I discovered cooking simultaneously with, food justice and, connecting to earth and sustainability. And all I knew was that when I was hands in the dirt and holding beautiful food that was, had been grown with love, and then preparing it with that love too, that it felt right, and that's where I belonged. And so I kind of like shucked off this like very fancy corporate job I had, and I ran away to Orcas Island, and I just grew food and I cooked food, and it was amazing. And then I was pregnant, and I didn't know anything about being pregnant or having babies or anything. And it was terrifying. And I just knew that I wanted to grow my baby in a way that would, be authentic to her, be authentic to me, and to, create a better life for her. And so one of the most important things we did, we found a midwife, and we had midwifery care, and we ended up having a very difficult birth. And something I'm super grateful for was that, just not expected, we, Emmy Yamasaki McLaughlin, who hopefully is watching right now, she was supposed to be the birth assistant, and because it was such a long birth, my original midwife had to leave, and Emmy stayed with me, and it's all come full circle now. So I think that's really amazing, and I think that is absolutely a gift from the ancestors and from Creator who placed that all together for me. But so we had this difficult birth, and that was okay. That was fine. because what I had really focused on and what was really important to me was I figured however the baby gets out, baby gets out. But I wanted to breastfeed my baby so badly. As someone who'd been working in seed to table cooking, who had been really immersed for years in providing whole foods to people and making, working towards equitable access to beautiful foods, I felt very strongly that, my baby needed my breast milk and that my body was ready to do it. Well, I didn't know that there was going to be so many factors. And so we had this just really terrible time. She was born in the hospital, and then she had some complications. She had to be resuscitated. She had meconium aspiration. It just was really hard, and we spent 3 days at Swedish hospital where she was born, and then we went home. We were home for a couple hours. We had dinner, and she started having these seizure-like movements. And so, of course, we rush her back and we take her to Children's Hospital, and we were in Children's Hospital for 5 days while they tried to figure out what was wrong with her. And in the interim, breastfeeding was enormously painful. I was crying all the time. She was nursing around the clock. My nipples were torn up and damaged, and it was just awful. And the one upside I felt like of being in Children's Hospital was that they were monitoring her weight gain and her diapers. And I felt like nursing wasn't going well, but they said she was gaining weight, and that's all I cared about. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I mean, I've been running around the hospital chasing this baby in her isolette, and I'm bleeding and I'm in pain and everything is awful, but my baby is gaining weight and she is safe, and that's fine. And we went on to have so many struggles. So it turned out that, so we got home, we thought she was fine. She was still seeing a cardiologist because that was one of the complications that she had. So we were seeing the cardiologist, and we get to the cardiologist. We were there for hours because we had to go in, we had to get the EKG, then we had to get an echo, and we had to do all of these things. So it was a span of hours with a 3-week-old baby, and I just am constantly nursing her. So, she would stop nursing for maybe 20-30 minutes, and then she would need to nurse again. And every time I would just hunch over and oh, in pain. I'm nursing my baby. It's terrible. I hate it, but it's so good for her. And the cardiologist came in at one point, and he says, "You've been nursing that baby a lot." And I started to get really riled up because I'm thinking, you can't tell me not to nurse my baby. How dare you? And I start, this is my baby and it's my job to nurse her, and I can nurse her anywhere that we are legally allowed to be. And so I am just going to do that. And he's like, well, I love that you're nursing this baby. You're doing a really great job. However, what I'm noticing is that you seem to be in a lot of pain, and she's not taking very long breaks, and it makes me wonder if you need some help. And that was amazing because we had spent so much time in various hospitals and with various doctors, and no one had identified that. And so I start crying, and then they hadn't weighed her yet, so they weigh her and they realize that she's still not back at birth weight. She's 3 weeks old. She had been at birth weight while she was at Children's Hospital. And it's funny because I, of course, now have done my own, I've done all of my own personal case studies on myself, and I'm like, oh, I can totally identify all the things that went wrong here. But at the time, I was just doing the best I could. Anyway, so we had this long and very, we ended up, she had a hidden posterior tongue tie. When we had been at Children's Hospital, what I realize now is that they had her on so many fluids that we were nursing. She wasn't effectively transferring milk, and but she was getting so many fluids that she was meeting all of the diapers and gaining weight. And then we got home and she lost all of that because she wasn't getting fluids anymore, and nor was she transferring milk effectively. So she had this hidden tongue tie, and we got to the doctor, and she just was like, you need to stop breastfeeding, or at least be supplementing with formula. You need to feed this baby. You're not feeding your baby, which of course was horrific to hear. I have this baby who has been in and out of the hospital, and I just was failing her, and it felt awful. And we worked with an IBCLC. We found her tongue tie. We got bounced around a lot because we were on Medicaid. We had no money. We were, I'm sure that there was some, some of the racism pieces in there, being a poor brown woman on Medicaid. So we did what we could, and we ended up connecting to a really great community of moms who did milk sharing, and we got donor milk, and I used an SNS, and I triple fed. So I was nursing, and then I was using the SNS with donor milk, and then I was pumping, and then we were giving a bottle because she couldn't even nurse effectively with the SNS, and we were finger feeding and all of these things. And it was just a really rough road. And it really, at that point, was what spurred me to realize that the work I was doing in food didn't start in gardens. It didn't start in farms. It needed to start with babies and moms and nursing people. And it needed to be rooted in finding that connection. And I still didn't know what that would be. And then I just kind of fumbled through it for a little bit. And I told my midwife that I wanted to help folks with breastfeeding somehow. I didn't know what that would look like or how I would do it. And she told me that there was a place that needed to open up, a location near me that was offering help with breast pumps, and it was owned by a lactation consultant. So I reached out to that lactation consultant, and I basically said, you need to hire me. I want to learn how to help people with breastfeeding. And so she did. She hired me. We created this resource center and helped people get their breast pumps through insurance and whatnot. But the real breakthrough came when my baby was about 3 years old, and I was finally coming out of this fog of postpartum mood disruptions. We had ended up nursing until she was about 2 years old, and we had a great connection, and she is an amazing child. But the first year with her was so hard, and I just felt so alone and lost and struggling. And I went to this conference, and Cami Goldhammer was presenting. So it was a conference for work, Breastfeeding Beyond the Hospital. And Cami was telling this story about traditions and about how she didn't tell us it was about gorillas. It was about gorillas, though. So at first, this gorilla who had been raised in captivity and didn't know how to, so she had never seen a mother gorilla nurse a baby. And when she had her own baby, her baby starved to death because she didn't know how to do it. And then she had another baby, and the local La Leche League came and demonstrated to this baby, or to this gorilla, how to nurse her baby, and she actually did it. And so she was talking about how epigenetic trauma and traditions, and how it can take often only 3 or 4 generations for traditions to be completely lost, and also for epigenetic trauma to be passed through babies, and through our blood, and how it changes us. And then she talked about how when she had her baby, she gave birth, and they laid her baby on her and helped her breastfeed, and she could feel her ancestors with her. And I was sitting there in this conference room, and I just started bawling, because I knew that's what I was missing. I was not connected to my ancestors when I gave birth to my baby. And they laid her on my chest, and I was alone. I had my husband, I had the nurses, but I was alone. And I knew that I needed them. It wasn't enough. It was enough. I realized now, when I was in the land and feeling that connection and cooking that beautiful food and connecting people with food, that was the ancestors, that was Creator, that was indigeneity, that was our people. And I needed more, and I needed those traditions back, and I didn't want to be the generation that lost them. And as much as I had always worried that I wasn't Native enough to claim it or to be connected, because my grandmother was taken, and because she was raised without our traditions and ceremonies, in that moment I realized, if I continued living only as a person in mainstream colonizer America, that was it. That was what, in our family line, it was success. That would be the completion of that genocide on our family line, on our side at least, through at the time my sister and I were the only ones of the cousins who had babies. And I realized that in this moment I get to choose, and restoring that connection to traditions, and that was a gift that I was being given, and that I could continue to give forward, and that so many of us need it, and that if we don't choose it and we don't restore it, those of us who were who come from those wounded and broken lines, that is just, that's colonization winning. And so in that moment, I knew it was time for me to heal and restore within my life and my community, and find my way. So at that point, after that amazing gift of discovery that I got from Cami Goldhammer, and hearing about how she was actually working within community, and providing really specific, culturally relevant care, I was like, that's what I need to do. I need to learn more, not just more lactation. I knew plenty, I'm always learning more lactation, but it would never be enough until I also had, those traditional practices, and was really rooted in the ancestral practices and reintegrating tradition and ceremony, not just into my life, but also into the work that I brought with people feeding their babies. And so this has been just this amazing journey, and it feels so right. And so I started connecting to different folks and, looking for different ways to be involved in the urban Indian community and learning more about, practices from Anishinaabe people and, I went through an Indigenous Doula course, and I have been, following Cammie's work and, anything that she was teaching. I was like super there and just trying to figure all of these things out. And in the meantime, I wanted to have another baby. And this time I knew that this baby would be guided by the ancestors. And it was interesting because I was raised with sisters, and I had a baby girl first, and I thought, I'm only going to have girls. That is my life. I'm going to be a mother of girls. And then we decided to have a baby, and I said, okay, let's have another baby. Let's do this. And I knew as soon as we made the choice, I knew that baby was a boy, that there was this boy baby in the stars for us. And it worked out. We had this, we ended up working with this really wonderful Indigenous Hawaiian midwife. And I feel like that was so important to our journey. And, the whole time I was pretty nervous because I'd had this really long, very difficult birth with my first. And we had a couple like hiccups, nothing huge. We had a placenta that didn't want to move. So we, I was looking at potentially having to have a C-section, and then it moved. And so everything was fine. We were on track for our beautiful home birth, and everything lined up great for it. And it was, it was really funny because my first labor, I went into labor when it was Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. I started feeling contractions, and she wasn't born until Thursday morning at 8:30. And I had been in active labor by Tuesday night, and we had gone to the birth center, and then we had transferred and gotten an epidural and yada yada, and then I pushed for 6.5 hours, and it was just this whole very very immense story. And then with my second baby, here we're planning this home birth, and I thought, I'm just gonna keep living my life. Contractions are starting again. It was a Tuesday morning, and Tuesday morning I was supposed to have a physical therapy appointment, so I still went to it. And so I go to my physical therapy appointment, and I luckily had my husband drive me because neither of us were really believing I was in labor, but just in case, we figured I probably shouldn't drive. So, and then we had to stop at the pediatrician's office on the way home because we had just gotten word that we were accepted off the wait list for a pediatrician that we wanted. And so we stop at the pediatrician's office, and I'm leaning against the counter roughly every 5 minutes to just breathe through big contractions while I'm signing paperwork. And the pediatrician is directly across the street from the hospital. And she's like, oh, okay, well, good. Luckily, we're just across the street from the hospital, so you can get right there. And I'm all, no, I live like 20 minutes away. I have to go home. And everyone thought I was just totally losing it. But I just knew if I could get to my home space, that everything would be okay. we got home and we started getting the tub filled up, and I still was like, this is gonna take at least a day, maybe 2 more days. I ate my lunch and contractions kind of slowed down. I called the midwife and still was like, I don't know if this is really happening. That was around 3 o'clock. They came over around 4, and by 7:30 I had a baby in my arms. And giving birth to him was such a different experience. And I still, you know, if I wasn't so dang old, I'm almost 40 now, but you know, there's still some things that I would love to do again. But this time I knew that the ancestors were with me. I'm gonna get emotional, I always do. You know, everything was happening, and my team was amazing. I had this beautiful circle of wise women around me, and you know, just really truly keeping this birth space, and keeping it very sacred and special and safe, so safe. I've never felt more loved or more protected than I did in that birth tub with these incredible people around me. And I pushed him out and I went away. I know that I was in the stars with him, and this was the baby. This was the baby the Creator made for me. My daughter is an old soul, and I think that she was a gift from the ancestors to help me find my way. And my son is a brand new star. And when I pushed him out, and he immediately, like, he came out, and my midwife placed him on my chest, and I was not in this world as I held him, and neither was he. And we were standing on the stars together, and he's just this, like, such this fresh spirit that I think for a couple minutes he wasn't sure if he was ready for this world, but he was mine, and we needed to be together. And then he came here, and he brought me back with him. And so it's interesting because you know, from the midwife's perspective, everything she said, we were both physically perfectly fine. But he didn't cry, and I just sat there with my eyes closed. And it took a minute for both of us to come back. And she said that happens sometimes. You know, you have to step to the other side to collect your baby, and sometimes it just takes you a couple minutes to all come back together. And it was really just another one of those really transformative moments, because I feel like as he was born, he was being handed off, you know, like he had been shaped for me, and he was being handed, like, very gently and carefully to me. And and that time, in that birth, my ancestors were with me, and I held him, and we had this incredible, I don't know, time. I don't know how much time it was. It was all the time we needed. It was perfect ancestral time. And we got in bed, and we laid there, and we were skin to skin, and we were comfortable, and warm and in our bed, and all of the things that I had thought were just part of birth, like being scared and being, going through different, different procedures and beeping and the white hospital and the baby being taken away. I thought that was just what needed to happen. And then instead, we had just the coziest, sweetest, snuggle-in recovery that I could ever imagine. And, we snuggled and nursed, and I felt all of the pieces. Like, it was just like being so connected to Earth, to everything, history and descendants, and everything in the future and everything in the past. And he nursed while his placenta was still attached, and until his umbilical cord was totally white. In fact, we completely forgot about it, I think, for at least 2 or 3 hours, and because we were just spending our time together, getting to know each other. And in that period, I was so determined to recognize the ceremonies that we were going through. Our birth was a ceremony. Our postpartum period was a ceremony. Our nursing was a ceremony. And in every moment, we were connected and intentional in how we were proceeding through these experiences. And we had many of the same clinical problems. He also had a tongue tie, which we took care of. And also we had, we were connecting. I was paying attention to his body. We were doing craniosacral therapy. We had, folks who were coming and paying attention to us as whole human beings. And we were integrating all of our practices and being intentional in the ceremony that we were bringing to these moments. And the experience with him was so completely different from giving birth to my daughter. And both of them have given me these incredible gifts through those experiences. And so I really, when I look at those, in addition to the clinical practice and clinical experience that I've learned over the years, I put all of that together now and bring that into lactation spaces. And I'm still learning. I'm still the newest, freshest student, and I am finding teachers everywhere I go. And I'm so grateful for everyone who is passing on the wisdom and traditions that they have been able to keep through all the generations. And I also, I feel like part of my work and part of my calling is restoring the connections that we have culturally and traditionally through helping us feeding our babies. Because what I realized with my first baby was that it wasn't just about the, what kind of milk she was getting. It was about sovereignty. It was about generational trauma. It was about resilience and restoration and connection. Sure, we had a tab A slot B problem in that her tongue wasn't working properly, but we had a lot of other things going on too that had nothing to do with simply how the anatomy worked. And now that when I'm working with folks, I see that a lot, and And lactation is an incredibly colonized practice. I look up to Cami Goldhammer so much and recognize from her, from the Indigenous breastfeeding counselor class that I took with her, that she created, because she's incredible, is that there are 12 IBCLCs who identify as Indigenous to Turtle Island. And that's outrageous. And a lot of what I grew up with feeling was that my heritage as a Native person was historical, that it was gone. And I have recently recognized that it's not gone. It's, even if when those of us who come from lines that were wounded, it's sleeping inside of us, and there's little ways that it comes out. And I absolutely believe that my work as a seed to table chef, my work in food justice, it all put me on this road, because then when I had my daughter, I realized that our food justice starts with the sovereignty of our bodies and being given the opportunity to properly support these connections that we have with our babies. And, thinking back to my grandmother, and that, she was taken away from her mother when she was 5 years old, and she never had a chance to learn any traditions or ceremonies or remember her language that she had been raised with. And I don't know our language. I'm learning words. That's the one thing I would change if we had another baby. I would love for the first words my baby heard to be ancestral words. And that's not something I was able to offer to either of my babies, but hopefully they will. Maybe that's something they'll be able to offer their babies. And so in my work now, that I'm so grateful and humbled to be able to do, I'm grateful that I have been given so many of the educational and clinical tools to be able to help in those ways. Sure, I absolutely can help you latch your baby. I can help you identify if you need to go take your baby to be seen by someone who can clip a tongue tie. I can help you, figure out how often to feed your baby and count the pee diapers and all of these things. But more importantly, what's more important to me often is helping us recognize that raising our babies is an act of revolution in many ways, and the ways we feed our babies is a revolution. So my grandmother was taken from her family, and so she didn't have access to learning how to care for her babies in traditional ways. Just like, Cami was explaining the, the animals in captivity and not knowing what to do with theirs. She wasn't allowed to even try to find these practices until 1978. It was illegal, and so the government didn't even want her to have babies ever. That's how badly they wanted us dead. And so to be working in helping other folks having babies and restoring tradition and ceremony in any way, particularly in nursing their babies, I feel like that is a huge accomplishment, and it is also a huge gift and responsibility, and I take it so seriously, because as much as there's epigenetic trauma, we also have epigenetic resilience. And when we take those traumas and we learn and we, find our teachers and our healers, and I'm so grateful to the teachers and healers that I have found. So little, shout out here, Cami, of course, and Melissa Meyer and Jadelle Bergeson and Rayanne Madison and lots of different people who are guiding me. Oh, Rhonda, hello. Rhonda Grantham, of course. And finding this community, I feel like I have, I found my way back to a place I never could have dreamed of. And so it's so much like that same moment where I met my second baby in the stars. I feel like I'm living in that moment now, where we are creating a more indigenous culture of raising our babies in ways that bring us back to being in touch with, the milk that comes from the one who grew you, and taking time to slow down and, pay attention to what's happening, and recognizing that the moments that we spend with our baby, the moments that we're, feeding that baby from our body, that is a ceremony. And we don't, even if we didn't grow up traditionally, we can find it. So Melissa Meyer, I just adore her. I met her last summer, and I was apologizing when I first met her, because I was like, I don't know any of this stuff. I don't even know if I belong here. And she just looked at me and she said, it's inside of you and you'll remember it. All you have to do is look. And it's been such a game changer, really recognizing that it's inside of us. It is the resilience, there's trauma, there's resilience, there's ancestral knowledge, and it's all coming back, and it all is working its way into my lactation practice now, and discovering all of, science is just now starting to catch up to ancestral wisdom, which is the most amazing thing to me, because folks talk about like, oh, it's got to be evidence-based, and sure, that's great. I love evidence, but also like grandmothers doing things for eternity, that's evidence too. When we recognize that we had these practices long before colonization, and if we stay in tune with them, how much better we're supporting each other. It's just, that is incredible medicine. The ways we care for our babies is ceremony, and the ways we feed our babies is ceremony. And after I had my second baby, then I was even more, I wanted to take all of this experience and put it back, because I realized I'm probably not the only one. I'm not the only one who wants to be connected, who wants to find my people and my community, but doesn't know where to start or how to do it. And so that was when I started looking at the positions that I am doing now. So the work I'm doing now, I work for Open Arms as a lactation support peer counselor, as well as for Journey Midwife Services as a health educator. So I teach prenatal classes. And before I started either of those, again, because I've dealt with all of this self-doubt and internalized shame, before I started those positions, I was really examining, like, do I get this? Do I get to take this beautiful gift that's being offered? Am I the right person? And I didn't know, again, because I'm still learning, I didn't know I was praying, but I was. And I went to sleep full of doubt. And I had this dream. And in my dream, I was in this huge hall, and there was banquet tables, and I wasn't sure what was going on. And I was walking around, and I kept hearing voices saying, "You don't belong here. This doesn't belong to you." And I would see a group of people, and I would try to go join them, and they would turn away. And I started trying to run out of this room. And I'm running out of the room, and I hear a drum beat. And in my dream, I was like, I need to just get out of this room. This is wrong. I shouldn't be here. And then I hear this drum music, and I close my eyes, and I feel my body moving. And I look down, and my feet are dancing, and I'm wearing the most beautiful jingle dancing dress, and I'm dancing, and I'm doing it. And everyone said, I didn't know that was her. And it was so right. And I knew that was an ancestor dream. And it was, it felt to me like they were saying, please take this gift and use it wisely. And so, that was then when I started working for Open Arms and for Journey Midwife Services, intentionally connecting to being involved with Indigenous community and offering peer lactation, specifically for other Native identified folks, and Diaspora folks too, of course, because we are not ever just one thing. I mean, we are, but, even the idea that, saying, well, I'm half this, I'm half that, we are wholly what we integrate and what we hold. And so I accept that gift now, that I had struggled with, because I felt so ashamed of the colonization that had been done to my family. And I think that is a gift that I can give to other folks in practice as well. Not just the clinical side of, this is how the mammary ducts are working, but also here is how your healing is working, and here is how your restoration is working, and here's, let's sit with, if you have some historical trauma that's interrupting how you are feeding your baby right now, or let's find that resilience. Let's have a revolution and feed our babies colostrum that is our first perfect food. Let's do this. So that is now what I'm bringing to my practice. So I've been doing this now, lactation, for about 7 years, 6.5. And I'm getting ready to sit for my IBCLC exam. So it's been a lot of work clinically, but I feel like one of the biggest hurdles that had stood in the way was, again, this really internalized self-doubt and self-shame, and not knowing what I was bringing. And now I do. I'm feeling very rooted and feeling very supported because of all of the incredible Indigenous birth keepers in my life. And the work that we're doing together feels like it's where I was always meant to be. And I'm just so grateful that I've gotten this opportunity to make it here. So also, if folks are watching from anywhere in King County, I do hope that you will reach out to Open Arms and Journey Midwife Services, because we do have in-home peer counseling, lactation, and also we're doing Zoom prenatal education And those are both no-cost services, which just feels so amazing to be able to offer. I remember with, with my first kid, not being able to have the money to have qualified or proper support. And so it's so meaningful to me now to be able to offer, know that I'm providing really qualified, really excellent care to folks from someone who relates to them, and not be charging anything. And because it's created such a barrier for so many of us, when there's products and services to get you, to pay for formula and to feed a bottle, which is fine. It's great. Babies need to eat. That is 100% I am all about. Let's feed that baby. But you know what? Even if you need to feed that baby formula, you also need actual support and care. And that community care, I feel like at the heart is exactly, what all of our ancestors did and wanted and provided to us. And it's been lost in this world that we're living in this current place and time. And so by providing it again, I feel like it's just another really beautiful way that restoring, healing, connecting. So another thing that's been really important to me and that I'm just feeling so grateful for is the way that we are now integrating all of this into making different various birth keeping positions more accessible to other other Indigenous folks. I'm just so excited to see all the work that Rhonda's doing with the childbirth education class, because everything is so, when you are unless you're living in a really traditional family, which I'm still incredibly jealous of folks who have access to that. But for those of us who are not, when we go looking for information, it's so hard to find any practices that are based in anything outside of these really, colonized American or, Canadian ideas. And so the having childbirth ed, we're working on trying to get make pathways more accessible through Open Arms for IBCLCs. I know, for me, a huge block for a long time was it's incredibly expensive. So you can either go through a university program and take out a bunch of loans, become a nurse, which it just isn't really my jam. I'm not a nurse. I want to be a non-nurse IBCLC, and I think it's really important that there are other Indigenous, brown and Black nurses, midwives, IBCLCs. It's just not the path that is right for me. But the difference in having a care provider who has a background like you, who looks like you, who feels like they resonate with you is so important. And I recognize in looking back that a lot of my experiences were very much colored by trying to be, my thing was always trying to be like the model minority. And also I didn't want to, instead of recognizing that there was so much systemic oppression involved in all of these different systems, I always took it to heart that it was my fault. Like, I didn't want to reflect badly on Native people or Mexican people or brown people. If I did something poorly, whether that was like did badly in school or was poor or didn't do well at birth. You know, I didn't want that to be adding to how people were thinking of people like me. And I'm recognizing now it needs to be the opposite way. You know, people like me have not had the opportunity to see people like us in those systemic positions. And so as much as I would love to say, like, check the whole system, I'm not going to be part of it, which I actually have gone through that phase a little bit. I'm recognizing that it's much more powerful to find ways to infiltrate the system. And so I am really excited. You know, we're working through Open Arms right now to find different ways to bring up more BIPOC IBCLCs and provide those opportunities. So, you know, one of the biggest barriers often is, you know, of course, not all brown and black and Indigenous people struggle with poverty, but it's no surprise when we have, you know, have had so many various different systems of oppression in the last, you know, spanning however long, depending on what our family circumstances have been. And even just the mindset that we should make it as impossible as we can to block people from having access to care is just, why would we do that? And so I'm just so grateful for the opportunity now to be setting up ways to make it more accessible. You know, not having folks be, you know, needing to be crippled with loans or, you know, a lot of, depending which pathway you take in lactation to become an IBCLC, you either have to pay for the classes and the, you know, time through the university to get your clinical expertise, or you have to pay a mentor to go work with them to get clinical experience. So we're working through Open Arms right now to try to figure out ways to decrease those barriers and make it more accessible. So one of the main ways is the program that I'm working in right now. It's a job. I get paid, and also we're having it become a recognized counseling organization. So that means that all of us who are peer counselors, that we are having our hours recognized as clinical hours. So rather than paying someone to give us clinical hours, we are actually getting paid to do the work and get the experience that will allow us to get the certification that then will allow us to work in many different environments, whether we stay with our organization or, you know, go elsewhere in the future. And then we'll create all of these amazing, you know, Black, Indigenous, people of color in lactation, which is currently not a lot of great representation. So I'm just really grateful that we are doing that. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting because we have all of these different ways that we are kind of moving and shaking and changing it up. So for me personally, it's been, you know, I feel like that this journey has been an incredible gift to me and to my family, to be given this opportunity for reconnection and restoration. I really, you know, now my kids know, you know, my kids are growing up more in ceremony and more in tradition than I did, and even more than my grandmother did, which is just, you know, that's hard thinking about, but, you know, once the pandemic is over, so, you know, we had been planning to take the kids and go back to Michigan and go back to our ancestral land with my dad and my grandmother, and we have put that on hold, obviously, because it's not safe. But my daughter, knows so much more than I did at this point. I mean, when I was 7, when I was her age, all I knew was, all my grandmother knew at that point, because she couldn't even remember anymore because she had been so young when she had been taken. So she said, I don't know the word in English of where I came from, but I think it's Ojibwe or Chippewa. She's like, that's what I think it is, because we didn't even know what land her family had come from, or what the English words were. So now my daughter can tell you all about Turtle Island and Anishinaabe people and Odawa people and Ojibwe people and different bands and tribes, and so this has been a, an incredible journey for my family of restoration and coming back together. And then I've now I'm working in community, seeing so many other folks leading the way, and I'm just so grateful to be included, and to have the opportunity to bring this into my practice and not to be running a colonized lactation practice. So this will end the recorded portion, and I guess we can do some question and answer. Thank you so much. Miigwech.
I want to thank you, Elizabeth. I have changed the settings so that anyone can unmute themselves. And I know I personally would just love to hear a little bit about in your training with lactation education. How was the Indigenous breastfeeding counselor training? How did that feel different, or how did that serve you to be able to do the work that you're doing now in a different way than other breastfeeding training? And I just would love to highlight how it's different, and in some of the ways that it just adds additional pieces, and would just love to hear from you as a participant, and all the other hours in training that are part of pursuing that IBCLC, which maybe you also should just spell out what that stands for.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
But I'd just love to hear about your feelings and perspective on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rhonda. So I'm glad that I had already done so much training, and I had learned so much, I'd had so much mainstream training when I went to Cammie's Indigenous breastfeeding counselor training, because it does allow me to really do a good job of comparing and contrasting the two. And it was amazing because I felt like it was so much more rich. We learned all of the basics, it was all the same stuff, that you would learn in a regular 45-hour lactation course, about, the standard, I usually kind of joke and call it the tab A slot B problems. But we also went into exploring these histories and, the shared epigenetic and historical grief that Indigenous people, that we all hold within us. And then we also really went into the resilience piece of it, and exactly like what I had talked about, that felt so so big to me when I was feeding my babies, that I didn't even have the words for, but about why it was so important for me to nurse my babies, because even though I had no other tools, particularly with my first baby, I had no other tools for connecting back to that heritage. But I knew that I could find it through nursing her, through feeding her my milk. And that was that connection that I knew was there. And it was really amazing in the Indigenous breastfeeding counselor training to have that integrated, because I feel like what happens a lot, particularly in working towards becoming an IBCLC, which is an internationally board certified lactation consultant. And so the IBCLC is the organization that creates the lactation consultants you'll find in the hospital or through many organizations. So generally when you refer to a lactation consultant, you're talking about an IBCLC. There's a lot of other lactation professionals in the world, either through organizations or through community learning and things like that. Here in the US, the other more common ones are the CLC, which is a certified lactation counselor, a lactation, LEs, lactation educators, but the ones that really are kind of given the like gold star of approval via insurance reimbursement are generally the IBCLCs. So, and in at least, and I've done a lot of trainings and a lot of education, and I've never come across in any other format where it's integrated to talk about people's heritage and traditions and trauma, and how these things also play into our lactation journeys. And it's an incredible disservice to lactating people to not discuss how these things intersect. And so just the fact that everything was so woven together. And then we also had, we learned additionally some ideas about how different problems were managed traditionally. We didn't go into too many of the like exact specifics because things do vary across Turtle Island. So that's, we didn't, I'm hoping to get more of that through lots of different things, particularly Rhonda, from you. But yes, it was, I think primarily the big difference was just the that integration of that our heritage is very important, and also that our the idea of ceremony through feeding our babies and sovereignty.
Okay, I see from Gloria just a response to excellent that said excellent, and I believe that was right in the moment when you were sharing about traveling home and actually standing on your ancestral territory, and just how important that can be in your journey to just coming home, and also that is happening with your other family members, both for the healing of the generations before you, and also that it's so crucial for your children. So I think that's beautiful that you're doing that, and I echo the other sentiment that someone remarked of how excellent that was. And then Andriana, feel free to just unmute yourself and to say or to ask a question or what comment or share a story. We welcome you to do that. So just go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I just want to say Gunachchi Shayi Yuchat Dosak. So thank you so much for sharing today. Or like your recording, it was so beautiful. My name's Shayi, that's my Tlingit name. My people are Tlingit Haida Aishihik from Alaska. And I've actually talked to you before over email recently. I don't know if you remember, but yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. So I'm pregnant right now, and baby's due in October. And I just want to say that I've been listening to these Zoom casts on Indigenous midwifery, and I am just so happy that this is available as a resource, and that the talk today is a resource, because I feel like really alone. Like I feel like wherever I go, it's like I'm in a foreign world almost, and it's like the systems I live in are like an attack on my body and my spirit most of the time. And I'm trying to protect my baby and reawaken my Indigenous ancestral knowledge. And it's really difficult, actually, because I'm just trying to survive in this system. So I just want to say that I really appreciate that this is here for other people, and I wish that we could all see each other and like be in a circle together and like do our traditions together. Like I feel like right now especially, it's like I wish that our tribes could come together like on Canoe Journey. I think like we'd be on Canoe Journey like right now, and that's not happening. And so I'm glad there's at least this. So gunakchish and thank you.
I'm so
Thank
glad
you
you were
so
able to
much.
join us, Shai. I appreciated our emails, and I'm so glad that you're joining us and that you're finding community here. You know, I hate that we can't be in person, but we're so resilient, right? Like, look at us, we're figuring it out.
I do have one more.
Sorry, go ahead.
I also wanted to say, if there are like, if you guys know of other Indigenous pregnant people who want to connect, I'd really like that. I'm really feeling the need to connect with Indigenous people, and it's actually not that easy. I'm like surrounded by white people constantly. So yeah, if there's a way to do that, I would really like to join a group or just talk to individuals even. So
Oh, and so Farah typed in supportive pregnancy with Elizabeth. So yeah, I do. Unfortunately, the time is hard for a lot of people, but I will put it out there again so all Indigenous people are welcome to drop into our supportive pregnancy groups. There's no cost. They are not all Indigenous people, but I particularly teach from my lens, and with a focus of coming from an Indigenous perspective, and I would love to have it be more Indigenous people. My class meets on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. And then we have Lactation Lounge every Tuesday via Zoom at 2 p.m. And those are great spaces. And then Makita is our other amazing, awesome instructor, and she is an incredible Black woman who's a mother of 7 children, and she teaches from that lens, and which is really amazing too. And her class is on Saturdays, I believe. So so those are available to anyone in King County, but I do know that the timing can be difficult.
And I want to also just share that the importance of gathering, whether it's through your ceremony right now as a pregnant person, or in your childbirth classes, in your times as we're kind of stepping on these pathways as birth keepers, to just be able to have that community is incredibly important. And it is challenging right now with all the way in which we're needing to be distant. But I also know that these opportunities, we're using this time to really settle, and that I know that there's a lot of work that's going in right now to be able to create and to then be able to launch more Indigenous centered programming. And so I want to just say that too, that I feel like I too, I'm a founder. I am the founder of the Canoe Journey Herbalist Project. And, I've been really grieving not being on Canoe Journey right now. It is hard. I need that time. I need that experience, and that we can't have that right now. But that I'm also just really seeing that there's a lot of a lot of things that are going to be able to be offered in the near future that are really going to be serving our people, and I'm really thankful for that. And so that's kind of what is serving me right now, is that I'm going to go inward, and I'm going to take this, time to really create, and in that I've always loved childbirth education. It's been one of my favorite and most consistent areas that I've worked in life, and launching the Indigenous Childbirth Educator program, as far as we've begun the applications, and the sheer number of applications and shares and the number of people reached and the comments and the emails and the people subscribing to the website have all just demonstrated that it's not only that people, the aunties, the people who are doing this work and feeling like they're on islands all alone, not only do they need support, but that we're all recognizing as a community that we want to create these spaces where we can hold our own and be able to speak, and to be able to share and offer the pieces to one another. So whether it's with Indigenous birthkeeper gatherings or future classes or more doulas and midwives and parent groups and breastfeeding circles, whatever that ends up looking like, I see such a change in how people are stepping forward and realizing how important that is. So I really thank you for just putting words to it, that as a currently pregnant person, of really craving that space. And I did as well. I mean, my daughter's turning 21, and I still just remember so much about how I couldn't just engage in normal conversation with people. I needed to have the people around me and holding me that I had this, spiritual connection with. And so I really hope that you can find, this is an informational space, and this is to just be a reminder that to help guide people on their path, and building community is so much a part of pregnancy. And it's both, it's creating the life that you want your baby to be born into, and so recognizing that you need that to really be Indigenous centered is really powerful, and right on track to where I feel like you're going to create that life for your baby. And also that one of the reasons I ended up taking so many childbirth classes and going to every group while I was pregnant, which I understand is more challenging right now, is because I was also shopping for that community. I was trying to find those friends. I was trying to find those people, and that, were, not only did we have a similar stage in life of that we would have babies that were, very similar in age or things like that, but that, we could really explore and support each other as parents. And so, I would ask the people in your life, I'm not sure where you're located, but I would ask, the midwives and the Elizabeths and the people like this, that, because I really appreciated the matchmaking that my midwife did for me. And honestly, we raised our kids together, and, are still close after all this time. And it was because I needed, at that time for me, I really needed other single mothers. And that was one thing that I was really just craving and hoping for. And, so put out there what it is that you need, and ask for it. And then, like I said, I know it's more challenging right now. I know this. And I have so much sympathy for you. But I also know that there are all the pregnant women that I'm working with, all of the pregnant families that are in my circle, are feeling the same way you are. And that need to have and build that community is always there and always strong. And so I just really hope that you can find in your area, you know, a beginning to start helping make that happen. Thank you for the thumbs up. So yeah, and then I'm also just curious if there is anyone on the call who is interested in becoming a lactation quote professional, and I'd love to just see if there is anyone who is interested in that path or would like to share, you know, their thoughts, or also, you know, why you aren't interested in pursuing any of these credentials, because that's just as valid. And for people who might be you know, on this call or listening to this recording into the future, I think having that healthy conversation about you know, how to acquire and participate in these sorts of systems to serve us, and versus where I feel like sometimes people feel like they need these credentials in order to feel valid, and that we need to push away. You know, what we hold, what we do, how we learn it, you know, from the stories, from the knowledge we acquire in all these other ways, is just as valid. And so you know, it is a very appropriate conversation to also just say, no, I'm not interested in certifying as a doula or pursuing an IBCLC credential or any of those things. And also that we want to support the people to where that would open doors, that would open a job or a position, or be a checklist of steps to where then they feel like they've acquired the knowledge that they could be of service. And so you know, both ends of that spectrum, when we're choosing it out of a place of empowerment, is really beautiful. And sometimes our educational pathways involve, you know, institutional learning and other organizations, and sometimes they don't. And so I just want to open up some space, because I feel like Elizabeth has answered so many questions for me and been so supportive to me about pursuing these credentials, and, you know, how that might be, how to even go about that. And so I'd love to just see where people are at. And, you know, I have a couple of chats, which you can feel free to just unmute yourself. Either Jessica or Bianca, if you'd like to unmute yourself and just ask your question, I welcome you to do that.
Hello, my name is Bianca. Yeah, so I have been listening to the class. I'm currently a doula and also a student midwife, but I definitely feel like I need to be able to offer this breastfeeding support to my client, my doula clients, as well as just even when I'm in clinic. I feel like I'm definitely lacking in this area, and so I'm definitely, I don't even know where to start. Like sometimes I think I become so overwhelmed with like doing research on certain things that I'm like, do I really, I guess where to start, you know, where I should start. But I think definitely just being able to educate myself a little bit more about breastfeeding in general, and yeah, so that I can better support my mothers that I'm currently working with. Because right now I'm like, oh, I know somebody who's a certified breast consultant, so I'll just refer my doula clients to them. And then really I feel like I offer everything but breastfeeding support. And so it's definitely something that I would love to learn more about, and I definitely need to be able to incorporate this in my services and just be able to help other mothers, whether they're my clients or just somebody asking for information. So I'm definitely interested.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. And I think in your situation, because you are like, you're looking for skills to augment, you know, it sounds like your ultimate goal and your primary occupation is going to be a midwife, which is phenomenal, and that's so great. You know, the thing that I realized, and Rhonda, I love that you brought this up. That was another part of Indigenous breastfeeding counselor training. I feel like that was a huge eye-opener to me. I almost completely stopped my pathway to choosing to get the IBCLC credentials when I realized how the entire organization was created out of gatekeeping. And so that was a big moment where I had to really reconcile do I want these letters because they're important individually, or because they will serve me, or some combination of the both. And Bianca, it sounds like, you know, finding the knowledge is really not necessarily the same as getting those credentials. And I also feel very confident at this point in my life now saying that there are many folks without those credentials who are incredible teachers and healers and helpers in lactation. And so I look at getting those letters, the IBCLC letters, as very separate from gaining that knowledge and that ability and that scope. And so if you are able to find a teacher and you're not as interested in getting the letters, it's not necessarily, you know, you don't necessarily have to get those letters to be a holder of that knowledge. And but the one good thing I will say, if you do get those letters, is those are the only letters that will, as far as I know, that will let you charge independently, like, and get paid by insurance for lactation consultations. I believe you can do some of it within midwifery practice if you are, you know, if it's part of your normal postpartum care. But outside of that, if it's, you know, for ongoing lactation issues, what you're needing is to be able to have someone pay via their insurance, which makes it more accessible. So that was what ultimately where I was like, fine, I will participate in your system and I will get your stupid letters because it's going to help me provide more equitable access to people, and also allow me to have equitable pay because, you know, I had worked for a long time as an assistant to an IBCLC who's a very good clinician, and it's certainly not meant as a you know, like any shade against her. She's a wonderful clinician. She's a white woman, and I do often wish I had done all of my clinical training under Cami or another Indigenous or Black or brown person. But there's also, like I said, there's not a ton of us, so you know, it's like, how would I have done that? Yeah, the letters are not necessarily important, but if you could find someone, well, unless you need to be able to, you know, get paid for yourself, because you deserve to get paid too, which is also always one of those interesting struggles, right? Like, I do think about it sometimes. I wonder if that is just part of our Indigenousness, you know. I'm like, I don't need to it's fine. I just want to do this. I just want to sit in a circle and we'll all nurse our babies and it's gonna be fine. And I don't want to take money for it. But the people whose house I live in need me to pay for that, and the water and the, you know, like all of the bills, because we do live in this current iteration of America. So, you know, and the navigating IBCLC is very difficult. And when I learned about how they came about, it makes sense. You know, I kind of briefly touched on it, but the organization really was set up, in fact, to gatekeep this idea of knowledge of breastfeeding support only belonging to these particular experts. Whereas, you know, Indigenous people, all of our heritage, all of our traditions, this was always passed down. You know, we were always aunties and grandmothers and mothers, and you know, co-nursing each other's babies if they were having a hard time. We were supporting and taking care of each other. So it chafes a little bit to be like, wow, this is a very expensive journey to get a piece of paper to be so that I can tell people it's okay for me to help you with breastfeeding. Even though so I'd spent all that time being an assistant and, you know, not making a you know, making very little money. So, you know, I would say at this point for me, it's more about that it allows that system to serve me, to help me serve my community in ways that doesn't charge the community money, but allows me to pay my bills. So, and I'm happy for anyone who's on this call who wants more information about navigating through the IBCLC pathways, because I will say part of it, when I started looking at it 6.5 years ago, I opened up their website and I was like, wow, this is complicated. And I shut it. I was like, I'm just gonna go learn from someone and then I'll figure out this bureaucracy mess over here. And then a year or two later, I was like, okay, I know my stuff. I'm feeling very confident in what I'm doing lactation wise. I mean, I still have to learn, but oh yeah, fair. But I feel confident that this is going to be the path I go on. So I opened the website again and I looked at it. I was like, oh God, this is still very confusing. And I shut it. And so on and so forth, like once a year. And I was like, I'm just going to keep learning lactation because that's the important thing to me, is I want to be able to provide really excellent support. And then finally I got to a point where I was like, I know I'm providing excellent support. The IBCLC I worked for was like, I'd have anyone go to you and trust that they were getting cared for as well as if they went to me, without a second thought. But she can charge someone's insurance $300 for a visit, and I was, I was not. And when I can't charge insurance. I can't, jobs that you can get paid for if you're in lactation without an IBCLC certification do not tend to pay very well. So it just depends how much we're participating in the system, right? And then, so Farah shared.
Also just say too that I think that sometimes the topic around just earning money is just very challenging for us as Native people, and that I also just want to say that, I, like, for example, I cannot sell any plants that I gather ever. I can't charge to be a part of a ceremony ever. I won't. However, when it comes to situations like this, the people who are able to do this all the time have to be able to have it be their livelihood. And so if you are wanting to be that person who goes and visits that new family and brings them that food and helps them, find rest and supports them with breastfeeding, then you do not need this credential to be doing those things. But if you are wanting to have this be your work so that you can be spending your days doing this instead of another person who, had no struggle with that in their body, it means that there are more possibilities for having it be your life. And so, I want to just say that I've had to sit with that so much with midwifery because it's really hard. And there are some things that I can't sacrifice. There are some things that just can never, ever have any sort of, Western dollar attached to them. And that at the same time, I want to see more people of culture and people of color in these positions where, they can be spending their entire work week offering the support. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in before you move forward, and that's part of this. Does this credential really serve you? And if it means that you cannot go and, do other work to be earning your dollars to pay your rent, and it means that you can hold that space for people, then that credential can really make a difference in the way your week is able to be.
Absolutely, Rhonda. And I think that's the part that sucks about it too, right? I mean, that's the hardest thing, because I think we all integrally want to be able to do the birth keeping that we're called to should be freely given. We should be able to freely give it, because we should be supported in a way where that is, everything is interwoven, and we are being taken care of as we take care of other people. The breakdown is, you know, that we live here now, and so if we don't get paid for our work somehow, then we have to go do other work, or we have to step out of this space, and then that work is done by someone who is not bringing to it what we do. And I struggle with that a lot, but that's why I like working for things where a grant pays me or an insurance pays me instead of the person. Oh, and then I made some kind of like checklists for folks within our organization to kind of map out where they are on the pathway. So if anyone, so I see Bianca and Jessica, that you all both are interested. Oh, there we go, Farah just shared them. So I kind of I hunted around for things that are like the least expensive classes online, and found some different options, because like I said, I know that a lot of times there's a lot of financial hurdles. So these were things that I had done so that I would know what I was getting myself into and how much I had left to like plod through and get to be qualified. You know, and again, I don't necessarily agree with all of the qualifications that they require, but this is to get these particular letters, this is how we have to go through these steps. So I made these forms. If anyone is interested in following an IBCLC pathway, I'm happy to sit down and have like an email conversation, go over them and see if there's anything I can do to help make it less overwhelming, because it really, like I said, I mean, for years, I would say, I should probably do this. And then I would slam the computer because it was just so awful and overwhelming. Farrah, actually, I'll just type my email address in the chat, and then if anyone wants to email me, I'm super happy to continue these conversations.
And it was extremely valuable to hear from you. Elizabeth did a presentation for several of us who are considering pursuing the credential. It was just really valuable to hear from someone who's currently right now in it. Right now, just about to have the last check mark done. And so it feels like really current information, versus, you know, things have changed when, you know, I looked at this years ago and I decided not to at that time, because, you know, it felt like something that I didn't need to bill separately. It was something that I was just doing in my midwifery life. And that, you know, if that is different for you, or also for a lot of people, for example, who might be doing other birth work as doulas or whatever, and then you need a space and time in life where you need to be off call. I also feel like if we were able to allow that more in these different phases of our life, it's so much easier to consistently stay a part of birth work, because there are times where you want to be home with your new baby, or, you know, when you just are dealing with some health struggles, or just where you need to take a break from on-call life, but that you still very much, you know, want to be supporting families, and that this, you know, can be one way that you can continue to do that. And, you know, I want to just say one more time that I think that I've probably been the most stubborn when it comes to dollars and this work. And I also want to say that I would really love for the next generation to not have to also be a waitress, or not have to also, you know, sell things, or not have to also do that extra, you know, clean toilets, or whatever that looks like. Just to be able to do this other heart work that we're very skilled at doing. And so, you know, I just want to say we all have to find our own piece and find out the parts that can have credentials attached to it and feel okay, and the parts that can have insurance companies involved and have that feel okay. And then that you can just stand in that integrity and be like, and not for this. Not for this. This is me, and this is my hard work, and I don't want to be a part of those systems, and you can choose it. And so, I really love that that we can offer our communities all of the different ways.
Absolutely. And I want to, I noticed Gloria, thank you so much for the message you put in the chat. The UCSD week-long training clinically is a very solid training. It does have a ton of microaggressions. So that compared to Cammie's class, so Cammie's class covers everything that is in that week-long UCSD class, but instead of microaggressions, has ancestral knowledge, and talks about trauma, and talks about grief, and talks about all of these things. And with coming from a place of lived experience, anyone who has the ability and access to taking one of the Indigenous breastfeeding counselor training, I think if you're here, I imagine you would love it. So she has a Facebook page. It is just called Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor, and they teach the class based on where they're invited. So a group or organization can invite them to come and do the training, so that it's not them imposing on, here, take this training. I love even that is her. She's so rooted in making sure that there's nothing colonizing about it. She waits to be invited. So if you have a Indigenous group or organization, they can invite them to come, and they do have a fee, but I don't know exactly how all that works. So you'd have to follow them and see where they're going, or have a group together to invite them or something. But it's a really great, really great course. And having taken a mainstream class and that class, I will say it is clinically excellent across the board. One is just culturally relevant and competent, and one is not. So I'm sorry you had to go through that, Gloria. But also really glad that now you can bring your wonderful self to your clients. And thank you for sharing that information about how midwives can do the billing for that, because that's not something I have any idea of how a midwife would charge for lactation services. But I know that if you are a midwife and you are absolutely helping with that, you should be able to do those things and get paid. And not have to be a waitress too, because I've done that. I've spent a lot of time doing 4 jobs just in order to keep doing the work that matters.
So we are nearing our time. I did want to just give one slow breath and let us just have one more moment if anyone has anything that they would like to say before we close. Okay, so Elizabeth, if you just want to have any closing words, and then I will end the recording, and hope to see as many of you as possible in future Zoomcasts.
Excellent. Well, thank you to everyone who's joining us currently live, and to everyone who may see this later. I just am overwhelmed at the reach that all of this is getting, and I'm just so excited seeing the way that this is growing. Thank you to Rhonda and everything that you do with the Center for Indigenous Midwifery, as well as the Canoe Journey Herbalists, because the hearts you touch, I can't put words to it. And seeing all of us flourish and grow in this resilience, and it's what we need, all of this beautiful healing and thriving, and seeing it in our communities is amazing. And so I love seeing us gather, like you were saying, Shai, we need to gather and we'll find ways to do it no matter what. And I love knowing that we're all out here doing this work together. And I hope that we can all spend time together in person someday. And thank you so much for all of your time and attention. Miigwech.